Okay, welcome everyone to the Collector Car Stories podcast on collectorcarcanada.ca. Today we're lucky enough to have a special person named Mark Rogerson with us today. Mark, there's a number of reasons I invited you on today, but we're at the 70th anniversary celebration for the Strokers Car Club out of Galt, Ontario.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you have a piece, probably its biggest piece of history is in your ownership. You're the current custodian. It's featured in this poster. I'm not sure if the camera can see it or not, but tell us a bit about, maybe we'll start with your business. Tell us a bit about your business. We'll get that out of the way and we'll get to the fun stuff.
Well, first of all, great to be here for Collector Car Canada. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks,
and it's just wonderful to be here at the 70th anniversary of the Strokers Car Club. Not many car clubs can say that, and that's why they're one of the oldest clubs. Technically, they go back to 51, so it's amazing that there's still original members here.
I think there's something about incorporation date and the 70th anniversary and the 73rd. So if the math doesn't work,
1954. 1954 is what they're going by, but they could go back to 51.
Yeah.
But no, it's great, and yes, I'm very fortunate to have found their original dragster, the Galt Dragster, but it was affectionately called by fans and racers the Purple People Eater. The only streamliner dragster built in the 1950s. Most of these cars are only found in California, Oklahoma, or Texas. So to find a car that was built to that type of spec in Ontario, thousands of miles away, is incredible.
Right.
And that's why it's just an anomaly that people who had said that car never existed. Well, it's unfortunate we couldn't move it over here, but it's over here by about 25 feet.
We did get some video of it.
Fantastic.
And we didn't want to roll it down the hill here by this barn, but we'll superimpose some video of it as you're speaking.
Outstanding. Yeah, it's a beautiful car, and I would be remiss if I didn't say I had a lot of talented pals that stood up or stepped up to help me on this. A lot of them shook their heads saying, man, this thing is very rough. But it turned out beautiful, and we've had the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a great run of, Concours d'Elegance. We had the car there, and Detroit, Cleveland, New York, Toronto.
Right.
And the car is just, has been so well received, and, it's been a top 20 car, a top 10 car.
We'll also link some information onto the screen where people can see some of that coverage. So if the club is celebrating its 70th anniversary, that must mean the car's got its origins in the 50s, Mark?
Absolutely, yeah. So technically, just to give you a really quick thing on the Galt Strokers, they used to be called the Dragons in 1951. Al Hallen, who's supposed to be coming, is their old president, and he has those roots going back to that club at that time. You got to remember, the American Hot Rod Association didn't start till, I believe, or the drag racing didn't start till 52.
Is that NHRA?
NHRA.
Okay.
And so that's how old this club is in Canada. But technically...
That really does reinforce it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How early it is.
They had an early dragster they took out in 57. Doug Lovegrove drove that car, and it was in a very famous write-up on this new phenomena of drag racing in Canada. And it's hard to believe they were pulling 3 to 4,000 people to the old Kohler track in those days. Huge.
Yeah, that's a big following.
So the car now is built to the 1958 spec. That's what it looked like in 1958. And again, it's a streamliner body, so it's fully enclosed. And that's what makes it unique. Plus, it has a full belly pan. It's 109 inches, which really a lot of the cars back then were only 95 or less. So it's long for that time period. Short for today, but very long for that time. Running Hemi power. We all think Hemi was common, but back then it would be probably Oldsmobile, Cadillac, 6 cylinders, flatheads, and maybe one of those new small block Chevrolets if you had some money. But Hemis hadn't really hit that yet. But they put a Hemi in, and the cool part about it is they narrowed the rear end, and that had only been started to be done by Mickey Thompson in 1956, the year before, on his panoramic special out of California. But back then, no computers, no texting. They would get their copy of Hot Rod magazine, and that was what they would tell them what was going on.
That's how the stories got spread.
And they saw the glass slipper on the cover in 1956, which was deemed the most beautiful dragster in United States, and they said, let's build one. And that's where this story began.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Mickey Thompson there, and to me, you've got a couple of years on me, Mark. Mickey Thompson to me is a brand of tire.
Yeah.
And while I was wandering around the car just now, I noticed there were Firestones in the rear.
Well, you know what? Firestone is one of the few companies through Coker Tire.
Oh, yeah.
There's a plug for I think the video
Well,
here.
I'm sure a lot of our
Yes.
viewers would know if they want tires to suit their vintage car, Coker tires.
And I
where
know
they go.
Collector Car Canada is very aware of that. They deal with a lot of these guys, and I'm no different. They make an 820 slick that's very apropos to that time period, and that's why I have those on, and that. So yes, Mickey Thompson wasn't making tires. At
No,
that
I
time.
figured he was racing.
1960.
Probably.
He was making tires. So that's how old this car is.
Yeah, very neat.
And probably originally these guys probably had tires that they actually shaved down because they didn't have much money.
Okay.
You gotta remember, they find you
to make them into slicks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they got stock car tires. And
Yeah. Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Collector Car Stories podcast. This is a supplement to an interview we had with Mark Rogerson, who owns the famed Purple People Eater, which appears on the shirt worn by our friend Andy here. The reason we have Andy joining us is that Andy was the original driver of the Purple People Eater back in the 50s. So Andy, why don't you tell us a bit about the build of the car and what it was like building a car in the 50s and then starting to race it?
Well, I think it was initiated by a gentleman by the name of Jim Watson, who was the president of the club at that time.
The Strokers Club.
The Strokers Club at that time. And he said, we need a winter project to keep interest in the club over the winter months when we're not out doing runs and stuff,
Sure.
So we decided, let's build a dragster. So we got together, probably 12 or 13 guys at that time, I would think. The oldest maybe 23, youngest maybe 17.
What would you estimate the year was, Andy?
I would say you're talking 1955.
Okay.
Okay?
Start of the Tri-5 Chevys.
Right. So anyways, we got Jim Watson, who at that time worked for a company called Royal Metal, who made office furniture. They were just across the road from Delta Park, where we had our clubhouse. So some of the tubing we got from them to build the frame. And
so it was a manufacturer. There's manufacturing going on.
There were manufacturing going on there, in Galt.
Galt,
yes.
Ontario. Okay, yeah.
And actually, the seat that was in the original dragster was a seat from a stacking chair that company
No,
made.
it was an office chair. Come on.
So anyhow, we built the one dragster over that first winter, 1955, I believe. It had a wide rear end, no body, just a shell over the instrument panel area in front of the motor. And then over the next winter, after we ran the car for a year.
So it was being raced in that spring of summer 56?
56.
Yeah.
So then
and were you the driver then?
I drove it. A lot of people drove the car.
Okay.
Everybody who was a part of the club at that time had the opportunity to drive the car if they wanted to.
Oh, that's a good way
Some
to
of them
track
didn't
members.
want to.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them didn't want to. But anyways, as the story goes, over the next winter, we decided that we were going to modify it, and we narrowed the rear end, modified the frame at the back to get the driver down below the rear end, and built the fiberglass body through the winter, and then ran it again with the body on in the next spring.
And did that result in some performance improvements? Those modifications?
Yes, it a little faster. Although it did add a lot of weight to the vehicle.
Okay.
With the fiberglass is not light, a light material. I think the car itself weighed about 1,750 pounds.
Okay. Yeah, I've lifted some Corvette hoods, and of course Corvettes are always been fiberglass.
Yes.
And it's bloody heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it would have been a quarter-mile exclusive car at that time?
Quarter-mile exclusive car.
What kind of times was it running?
We were running around 13.5 maybe, somewhere in there. The car was slow off the line because of the weight.
Right.
And it had a fifth cycle cam on the engine, which didn't kick in until the RPM came up. But it would do, I think we have a record of 128 miles an hour in the quarter mile.
In the quarter mile, it got up to 128.
Yes.
Wow. I'm surprised it was a 13.5 second. I would have thought faster than that.
Yeah.
I know in current form, it's running a Chrysler Hemi engine.
Yes.
Was that what it was running in 1956?
We run a DeSoto Hemi.
Okay.
And we had
also a Hemi.
A Cadillac transmission with only second and high gear in it. and a Ford rear end.
So it started in second gear.
Started in second gear. Always started in second
And
gear.
a Ford rear end. So you had all the, at the time it was big three. I think we call them the Detroit three now. Yeah. So all big three represented.
Yeah.
Just like center field at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that. There's a General Motors, a Chrysler, and a Ford logo out in that, beyond the outfield in Detroit, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So,
I know the one member of the club, Doug Lovegrove, who now lives in Las Vegas.
okay.
He was a Chrysler mechanic. And he was the one who got us the motor.
That's probably
for the
why
car.
it was a DeSoto engine.
Yeah.
And DeSoto was still building cars in 1956. I think it finished around 59 or 60, didn't
Something
it?
like that, yeah.
And is that when it, this is off topic, but is that when it was bought by Chrysler, or was it?
I just think it was one of those lines they discontinued.
It was a Chrysler
I think
line.
it was a line they discontinued.
think you're
like
right.
they discontinued Pontiac and
I think
all
you're
that
right.
stuff, you know.
Yeah.
It's,
Plymouth later for Chrysler, of course.
Oh, it used to be Dodge Plymouth.
Yeah.
And then Plymouth
And there's no
disappeared.
more Plymouth.
You know?
Right.
So,
In fact, we've sold some Prowlers on our website, collectorcarcanada.ca. The early ones are Plymouth Prowlers. The later ones are Chrysler Prowlers, because the Prowler outlasted Plymouth.
yeah.
So it sounds like the Strokers Club continued to use. Was it called the Purple People Eater at that time?
No. We only called it the Dragster.
You called it the Dragster.
The crowd at the drag strip
Okay.
called it.
That was the nickname from
The Purple
from
People Eater.
the spectators.
From the spectators, because there was a song at the time called the Purple People
Oh,
Eater.
yes.
So they used to play that Purple People Eater
Sure.
song when we drove it down the
That's
strip.
great publicity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Made you famous.
Oh yeah.
But another Purple People Eater in pop culture, as you may know, the Minnesota Vikings NFL team wears purple uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was in the 70s, their defense was referred to as the Purple People
right?
Eaters. Yeah. But we know where they got it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're paying royalties.
Yeah.
So, summers of the 50s, probably into the early 60s, did it continue to be used as a dragster?
I think the club members all put money in every year to keep the car running.
Okay.
And after 2 years, they said they're not going to put more money in the car.
Okay.
They've had enough. Because we kept, you'd blow a rod or blow a piston or something.
It was a bit of a money pit
And it
for
was a
some
money
people.
pit.
And some members love the idea of supporting the race cars, and other people wouldn't have been as into it, I guess, eh?
So at that point, Al Howlett and myself took the car over, and we ran it up to 1961.
Okay.
And at that point, I had
So
left
that's
the club.
7 summers, I
And
think. Yeah.
Al,
You'd left the club, you said?
at 61, I left the club.
Okay.
And then Al sold the car off.
Okay.
He sold the car off. So Graham and Uncle ended
Early
up
60s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Graham and Uncle ended up with a body. I think a club out of Fergus ended up with a frame.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if Norm Whitlaw ended up with a motor because he had built a car
That's the fellow who worked for Chrysler?
called the Gladiator.
Right.
Norm Whitlaw. He could have got the motor out of the car.
Oh, so it ended up being parted out
So
in
it
the
was all
early
parted
60s.
off in the 61, yeah.
Interesting. And were the purchases of these components, were they active in the drag racing scene at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So
yeah.
it continued in drag racing, just
Yeah.
in a different form.
Yeah.
Okay. So did it just disappear from people's consciousness in
It-
the mid-60s?
I think so. I think so. It was just one of those times. It was one of those times you just go through a period, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, the body did remain, although in very poor condition over the years.
Mm-hmm.
It sat outside, and luckily, where it was sitting on this property, I guess it became an eyesore because of all the other stuff that was there.
Sure.
And the township where this person was decided that it should be cleaned up.
About what era are you talking now, do you figure?
I'm talking probably 2012, 2013.
Okay, so this
somewhere
is
there.
pretty close to when Mark Rogerson came
Yes,
into the scene.
yes.
And this was in Stayner, Ontario, if I
Yeah.
got my story right.
Right,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, Mark did not tell us that the owner would have been getting heat from the
Well, I
township.
think at this time he had passed away at this point.
Okay.
I think his wife and his son lived there.
And they were getting heat from the authorities to
Somebody
clean
else,
up their
probably.
yard. Oh, okay. Interesting.
That's the story I hear anyways.
Yeah.
You know.
And when would you have heard the one of the original drivers, when would you have heard that Mark Rogerson was trying to make an effort at restoring it and bring it back to life?
Mark is a collector of anything to do with drag racing. You have
Yes.
to know that right off the bat.
Yes.
So, because now he had found this body, and I don't think he worked on it right away. It sort of sat until somebody said, "No, Mark, what are you going to do with this?" And he said, "Well, I guess I need to fix it." So, This is before COVID.
Right.
There was a car show in Hamilton at the airport.
Oh yes,
And,
the air show, the air museum.
I
Yeah.
went down there and met Mark at that time.
For the first
For
time.
the first time.
Oh, good.
So that's where we
Pre-pandemic, you said.
pre-pandemic. So that's where we made the connection.
Before the car was restored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a body sitting on the floor.
Oh, he had it on display though.
Yeah, it was on display.
Oh, okay.
Only the body sitting on the floor. Yeah.
Okay.
And in the condition he found it in.
And when you went to this show, did you know you were going to see the Dragster?
No, I just went to meet him. I heard the body was
You'd
there.
heard. Okay.
So I went down to meet him
All
because he
right.
wanted to meet me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So you met him for the first time on the floor of an auto show. How
Yeah.
perfect.
So
And how did that first conversation go?
it went good. He was quite happy. He
Yeah.
was quite happy. You know, it's one of those things. We had met a gentleman from the U.S. who puts out a magazine called Speed Culture, and it's only firstly available in the U.S.
Okay.
And he was at the car show that we're at in Cleveland last fall, this spring, I guess, for the show.
Okay.
And he wants to do a full article on the car in that magazine. I don't know if he's done it or not. I couldn't tell you, but I don't know.
It seems like Mark is doing a good job at getting publicity for the car and sharing the story and the history of it. He also seems really interested in history of anything automotive.
Yeah.
So when I was speaking to Mark about it, it felt like the car ended up in the right hands.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. There's a couple of people, I think, who are a little upset that Mark ended up with the body. But I talking to the one person in particular, he says, we wouldn't have done what Mark's done.
Who else would have done with that car? We don't have the car in front of us just because we needed to get away from the hustle and bustle of the show today, but we're going to superimpose a little bit of video as we're speaking here, so the people watching will be able to see the car. And they'll know that it's not some beat up old fiberglass shell found on the side of the road in Stayner, Ontario now. Yeah. And running a business, you've got life experience. I think we all know that you can please some of the people some of the time. You can't please all of the people all of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Got that right. I know I was involved in minor hockey for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
You know you can't please everybody.
The angry dad at the corner banging on the glass. Yes, I'm familiar with the minor hockey atmosphere. Any racing stories from the old days you want to store? Is there anything exceptional or that stands out in your mind in the memory of using the Dragster? I'm going to start calling it the Dragster now that I know that's the original name.
Well, I think one time, we used to go down to Dunkirk, New York the odd time and run it.
Okay.
And the one time we were going down there, I was towing on the back of my car, and we missed a stop sign in Buffalo, going through Buffalo. And we got stopped.
I'm sure that wouldn't attract any attention.
We got stopped by the police, and he come over and said, boys, you got to be careful because a person got killed here last night.
Oh, jeez.
And he says, just take it easy, because he was more concerned with looking at our
Yeah.
was giving us a ticket. But it was just one of those things,
Yeah.
And
bad timing, I guess.
I think the one
Might have been a made-up story, though, just so we
Yeah.
could check out the Dragster.
The one time, I blew the clutch in it one day. That did a lot of damage.
Yeah. While racing?
While racing,
Yeah.
While racing. And of course, that's quite an explosion when it comes apart. And it's actually sprung the frame to the point where the steering came apart. So I had no steering going down the track. And like our club, the Skull Strokers, and the Brantford Piston Pushers Club were the two clubs that actually got drag racing started at Kohler.
Right. At Cayuga?
At Cayuga,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Because I get down to that track a little bit now and then, just with my cars for the street, but lots of fun. Good. And was it a decorated car in the 50s and 60s? Did it win some races?
It has a record it has a couple of records, It has a couple of records for the best time. I'm trying to think what other stupid things happened with it.
Yeah, having spoken to Mark, though, the current owner of the car, I think he even plans to run it and do some vintage racing later on this summer.
Hopefully that's going to happen. Hopefully I'm going to get to drive the car again.
You're going to drive it. He
Again,
mentioned that. Yeah.
It'll be an experience.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. I don't know how much time I want to spend with Mark with this car. I've spent a lot of time with him in the last year and a half.
Well, you have knowledge.
Many car
You have
shows.
unique knowledge
Many
that's
car shows,
useful to him. Yeah.
But But
And the the interesting thing to me is that 20 years ago, not that you thought about the dragster often, but you probably never thought you'd see it again.
no.
And then just out of the blue, 8 or 10 years ago.
I often say that, if you look back at that particular time and all the children that were born before the Second World War are now young teenagers in the 50s.
Yes.
And they all want a car.
Right? And that's baby.
And they all want a car faster going the other guy's car.
Yeah.
And that's how this drag racing all got started.
Yeah. The culture is different for cars now, for the younger people.
There were so many things, like the war was over, everything was booming, the world was trying to recover.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was good times.
A lot of things, drag racing became very popular. Skydiving became very popular. There was a lot of sports that sort of came out of the war people.
Right.
At that time.
They were really appreciating their freedom. It's funny in my business, Andy, I often get to speak to and spend time with people older than I am, and I hear stories like this and I get the thoughts developed. It's so neat because people my age, we weren't there. We didn't get to see this, and I didn't live through a war. I mean, there have been wars overseas in my lifetime, but I remember when my grandmother was still living, she would tell me about rations and only being allowed to buy a certain amount of things at the grocery store. And it was just a different time. So to live through that and then have it end must have been a real, celebration for people.
It was for a lot of people,
Yeah.
Very fortunate, my father was in the war, he came home alive. But a lot of parents didn't.
Yeah.
A lot of parents didn't.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. But it was, like I say, I'm happy that I was a teenager.
Yeah. It's good timing.
And a young man.
Good timing, yeah. All right, Andy. Well, I think we'll wrap up unless you have anything more to say.
No, I think that's about it.
We've shaken you up enough probably for today.
And I've enjoyed it. It's been a good ride.
Well, I mean, today, we mentioned this on our earlier conversation with Mark, how today is the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the Strokers, and there was a 50th celebration 50 years back. I didn't attend that, but at the 50th celebration, I don't think anyone foresaw the Dragster turning up 20 years later.
No, it wasn't.
And the fact that one of the original drivers, some of the original members are here to celebrate with it, it's a really neat thing, and beyond that, it speaks to car culture and how it brings people together.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a time that will never reoccur.
That's right.
That's right.
We'll appreciate today. So when you get into that car again, Andy, at the drag strip, you drive safely.
I will. I told Mark, I said I want one slow drive down the track to get a feel for the car, and then we're going to give her hell.
Yeah. Well, again, Andy, thank you very much. There's only one guy who could have given us that chat, and it's you, so we really thank you.